Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. I'm your friend David McGlennon, and I'm really glad that you're here with me today. You know, there are people who you just know are great leaders, and this guest today is one of those great leaders, a guy by the name of Greg Fuhrer, and I can't wait to share with you this episode. And I'll tell you why here in just a moment. But before I get into that, would you please do me just a quick favor? If you haven't gone out and rated and reviewed the podcast, I would really greatly appreciate it. It will help us to reach more leaders, to reach more people with this message of intentional growth and getting out into your growth space. I really appreciate that. So just take a moment right now, whatever podcast app you use, go to the place where you can rate it. Give us a 5-star rating if you can. And in your review, maybe just share something that has been impactful for you from the podcast. If you've listened at all for any length of time, maybe you've had a great takeaway or you have a favorite podcast guest, love for you to share that in your review if you would. Now, let me just share with you about today's guest, because I've often said that there are very few people that I know that are really intentional around their growth. But I'm telling you, Greg Fuhrer is one of those people who is very intentional with their growth, very intentional with their leadership. And I'm so excited to have him here on the podcast. You're going to understand why I really appreciate Greg and just his wisdom and insight in this area of leadership and personal growth and development. So Greg is the CEO of Beratung Advisors, and he's also the founder of Beratung University, which he's now calling Teach Passion Summit. You'll hear more about that here in our conversation. But Greg and I met after an event that Doug Smith, who is a mutual friend of ours, put on, and we got a chance to connect there and meet up and just get to know each other a little bit. And then, obviously just following up and having some follow-up conversations, we've gotten to know each other. I spoke at Beratung University this year. I am going to be a speaker there next year. I'm really looking forward to that as well. Well, it's actually Teach Passion Summit now. I gotta switch my mind on that. But I'm really excited to have you hear Greg's growth journey. Listen to the things that he shares, not just from his own personal story and his past, but the path and how intentional he is. We talk about mentorship and how to be very intentional about mentorship. We talk a lot about just the intentionality of life. And I know that you're going to really get a lot out of this episode with Greg. My encouragement to you is listen through and then come back and listen through again and just take notes. Take notes of things that hit you that maybe you can implement in your own life as well. I know that you're going to really enjoy this conversation with Greg. So let's go ahead and get into that right now. Well, hey, Greg, I am really excited to have this conversation with you and have you on the podcast. I've said often that you are probably one of the most intentional people I know around personal growth and development and leadership. And I'm always curious to know, like, where did that start? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I like to say I kind of came out of the womb. That's probably not perfectly correct, but I can't remember when I started listening to audio cassettes because my dad played them as far as I can remember. And hopefully my daughter says the same, because when I brought her home from the hospital, she was listening to The Servant. That just happened to be the book was a cute at the time. It wasn't my favorite book. Yeah. And I always say she's not going to remember time when she wasn't immersed in leadership development. I took her to leadership conferences when she was less than a year old, right, in a little cradle. So I don't know when it is. You've seen her to Teach Passion Summit we do. Mm-hmm. She comes the last day because I believe more is caught the tot. So my dad growing up was not only doing that, but was making me set goals when I was like 6 years old.
Wow, no
My
kidding.
daughter, 6 years old, has goals and was constantly taking me to every meeting. So at that point in life in his career, he was an optometrist by trade. Mm-hmm. And he would always tell you he was a business leader, that happened to be an optometrist, not an optometrist that happened to be a business leader.
Okay.
So by the time I was a mistake, or as my mom would call it, a pleasant surprise. And my brother's like, no, Greg, that's a mistake. Like,
I'm sure.
mom just tell you
Oh
that.
gosh.
So it was really awesome though, because by that point in time in my dad's life, he had been successful in business. And so he was working one day in the business and working the other days for the business. And
Okay.
so he was constant in community, be involved. So when he was a township supervisor, I went to those meetings.
Mm,
When he was in Kiwanis Club, I went to those meetings. When he was head of the midget football, I went to those meetings. When he
yeah.
was on church council, I went to those meetings and sat in those meetings when I was 6, 8, 10 years old. So
Wow.
I kind of learned about leadership development. The other thing he intentionally did, and this is in the 90s, right? The early 90s, it wasn't heard of. He would take his entire office staff. So he had 4 different offices. And that was like, we had other businesses, we had bagel shops and golf courses and other stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially, he would take his staff to leadership development conferences and
Really?
fly the whole
Wow.
team in with them and teach them sales training tactics,
Yeah.
teach them how to do it. So it's really came from me and it was bred in me. And
Yeah.
my brother Jason's really into it. My brother Mike, not so much. My sister, not so much. But I'm into it more because I kind of grew up in a different household I did because that's what I did with my dad. So we didn't
Yeah.
play catch. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
did, but like that wasn't our big thing to do.
Yeah.
We did leadership development together. So that's kind of where it started. And,
That's
and I
so
think that
good.
I've learned a lot from him, but I've also learned what not to do. So I
Yeah.
like to joke around. I think he read books through osmosis. So he had a book buying problem
Oh yeah.
where he would buy 10 or 15 books in a month
Yeah.
and never read them.
Oh
And I
man.
read 10 or 15 books a month. So
Right.
like that part of me, he still read a lot. Obviously audio cassettes, I always like to say that I feel like Zig Ziglar
Yeah.
and John Maxwell and Stephen Covey were like godparents to me,
Right.
especially Zig
Oh my
Ziglar. I could like
gosh.
close my eyes, hear his voice. I could
Yeah.
hear Stephen Covey's voice. But
I love
yeah, so
that.
that's kind of how it all started.
I love that, Greg. And just as I hear you sharing that story, I kind of go back in my own mind to my dad. I mean, my dad and I were business partners for almost 20 years, and I just the impact that he had on my life was it's immeasurable. I mean, and some of it was intentional, but other parts of it wasn't intentional too. And I mean, I think you talk about cassette tapes. I used to have the Nightingale Conant catalog that would come to the house. And like as soon as that came, I'm sitting there going, okay, I want that one, I want that one. So I was always putting cassette tapes, at an early age into my player in my car. But you talked about like the impact that he had on you in a good way, but also I learned some stuff from my dad that wasn't the greatest. Like I also, because I was so close to him, I also saw what he did that maybe like wasn't the best choices. And I guess I just am curious, like as you look at your relationship with your dad, were there things that you saw in him that you thought, wow, I'm never going to do that, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing? Because I know, like for me, there's been some things that I'm like, I'm not going to be like that, But he also programmed me, so part of me, I am like that, or I had been like that, and I had to change. I had to do some things to help me grow.
Yeah, that's a great question. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone's really ever asked me that because I always like to tell people I learn way more from mistakes than I ever do from success. We tell us our
Yeah.
team all the time there's wins
Yep.
and lessons.
Yes.
And I'm kind of naturally wired that way. If you take any type of assessments out there,
Mm-hmm.
I just tend to make mistakes. I'm a jump off the cliff, figure out how to build a plan away type down, right? I'm
Yeah.
very quick starter oriented, like let's just do this.
Yep.
So I'm okay with making mistakes. When we talk about it here, we have a culture of making mistakes.
Mm.
My dad, I learned a lot from his mistakes,
Mm.
almost equally as much. There was actually a point in my life that I'm not proud of that my dad and I didn't speak for a year.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know
You
that.
know
Yeah.
why? Because I wasn't listening to him. I wasn't doing things the way he wanted done, right?
Sure.
It wasn't anything bad. He just got mad at me and stopped talking to me.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that that's one of the things I learned from my dad is
Mm.
my dad would have periods of feuding with people
Mm-hmm.
where he wouldn't talk to them.
Oh.
So my daughter's adopted, and we had two failed adoptions,
Mm.
and then we had hers.
Yeah.
And in Pennsylvania, the parents have 30 days to change their mind.
Oh,
So
really?
day
Okay.
29, right, brought my daughter home from the hospital, day 29, her father sent us a letter saying he wanted her back.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So then went through like a year-long custody battle, which we won. So what I had to do during that time was pray over him.
Mm.
See,
Wow.
forgiveness.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, my father's father, is also one of the most impactful
Mm-hmm.
figures in my life, held grudges.
Oh wow.
And my father and his father didn't talk for a period of about a year.
Wow.
Now all those reconciled. And by the way, I was probably the most at fault,
Mm.
right? You are always the problem. You can control how
Yeah.
you react,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
But that's what I learned was, and I'm not perfect at it.
Right.
I die new every day, right? I'm a sinful person and I constantly have to die new in Jesus Christ to be saved from my sins. So I'm not saying I'm perfect about it, but I want to forgive others the way
Yeah.
my Lord and Savior has forgiven me. I
Mm.
learned that from my dad.
Mm.
One of the other things I learned from my dad was to not blow up. So there were
Oh.
some times where I was in business meetings, and there's a famous one. It was a church meeting where he literally walked up, and again, my dad, God rest his soul, but I'm very transparent about anything I did wrong in my life, but gave two middle fingers, one in each eye to a lady
Oh
in a meeting.
man. Oh my gosh.
Can't make this up. But those were lessons. That's
Yeah.
real. That's
Yeah.
real. I think the last one that I would highlight,
Mm.
that and sometimes, by the way, it's kind of like an adoption. Usually, if somebody grew up in a wealthy home, they want a poor home for their child. If they grew up in a poor home, they want a wealthy home, right? If they
Yeah.
grew up in the country, they want the city because whatever in their life
Yeah.
is broken, they think.
Mm.
So having a different life would fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think sometimes we push the baby out with the bathwater
Mm-hmm.
and we try to overcorrect too much, and this might be one of them. But my dad, I learned who, not how. I mean, that's just when I read the book Who Not How, and it's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
It wasn't transformational; it was just confirmation of what I always do. Like I'm
Sure.
a natural delegator, natural hire. My dad taught me that.
Mm.
The difference, though, was my dad always hired the cheapest who. My dad
Oh.
was always trying to cut corners and try to find somebody that maybe did stuff under the table, maybe didn't do things the best way, always cheap, always bought cheap products.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
a quality first person. I'd rather buy
Yeah.
something that's more expensive that
Yeah.
lasts 20 years
Right.
than buy something that's cheap. And, he had addiction for anything that was on sale.
Yeah.
But all those things, you know what? It's funny because there's a lot of things I could say that were quirks
Yeah.
that now, as I get older, my brothers like to tell me all the time. They tell my wife, "You never met our father, but you live with him
You live with him. Oh
because he
gosh.
is a spitting image of it, right?" So all the best parts of me,
Yeah.
they're there. His thumbprint is on it, but all the worst parts. But I
Love it.
think that's what people do with leadership.
Yeah.
When we want to mentor, and we see this at church all the time, where these pastors are put on this impossible pedestal and they
Yes.
come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
We want the leaders, the people that are different than us,
Mm-hmm.
to be something better, something aspirational that we can't get to.
Right.
But I think great leaders, the brotherhood of leaders I have, the mentors that truly mentor me,
Mm-hmm.
are radically transparent of their faults
Yeah.
and are
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Mm.
And great leaders are vulnerable. So
Mm-hmm.
some people might hear this and might be like, that was really rude to talk about your passed away father, that he did those things. But I think they're important
Yeah.
because when we honor his legacy, if I don't want to make the same mistakes,
Right.
my child needs to know my mistakes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, my daughter will
Mm-hmm.
learn more from my mistakes because mistakes are a greater teacher.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing we think of other leaders, we always judge ourselves by our intention,
Mm-hmm.
but we always judge others by their actions.
Actions. Yeah. So
And so
true.
I think it's just so important as leadership. Surround yourself with leaders
Yeah.
that are going to call you out
Yeah.
and tell you your mistakes so you don't make them.
Yeah. And you said something there that just I'm always curious about because there's a lot of leaders in today's world that don't want to go through the pain. And I think that they see the glory of leadership. I'll say, the glory, like you're on stage and the famous John Maxwell will always say, somebody comes up to him and says, "Hey, I want to speak on stages like you," and he says, "Great, did you do what I did, or will you do what I did?" And to me, that means a lot of pain and suffering and going through stuff, going through the yogurt of life, so to speak. And I wonder, like, how do you help leaders? I mean, you know that I work with emerging leaders, and I love teaching them, and I love helping them to grow, because my father wasn't super intentional at it. And one of the things he didn't teach me that I had to learn the hard way is that some of my most difficult lessons, but most impactful lessons, were going through pain and going through the pain of life. And I'm kind of curious, like, how do you help your leaders and maybe even yourself learn from that pain, or even just kind of see pain differently?
Yeah, so I think this is something that we get wrong as a society, not just for leaders, but for children, right? There's a great
Yeah.
book out there called Comfort Crisis
Hmm.
and Anxious Generation that both kind of cover this.
I've not seen
But
that
I
one.
think what
Okay.
we try to do is we try to coddle our children.
Yeah.
And by the way, I believe I'm called to be a father of leaders. So I think a great leader is a father figure, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I say children, leaders are the same type of thing. And when you're working with an emerging leader, we need to cheer for them to fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need the trophy for everyone doesn't win, because in life, not everyone gets a trophy.
Right.
Failure is good. Breaking bones are okay.
Yeah.
Touching a hot stove is okay,
Right.
because we learn more from our failure than we do from our success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great athletes have trials and tribulations. You don't become Tom Brady by being the first overall draft pick. You got to be in the sixth round
Yeah.
and have a chip on your shoulder.
Yes.
Right? There's more stories of the great phenomenal athletes having trial and tribulations
Yep.
than there are about them just being crowned a champion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we are leaders, what we try to do is we try to solve the problems for our team members, as
Yeah.
opposed to letting them solve, even when we know that they're wrong.
Yeah.
Let them make mistakes in controlled environments. And then when they make
Mm.
mistakes, do not yell at them.
Right.
Do not tell them what they did wrong. Be empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown always says that empathy when she's down in the pit.
Mm-hmm.
Be in the pit with them and say, and also tell me what you learned from this,
Learned. Yes. Yes.
right? So one of the things that I do, and Dan Sullivan has a thing called the experience transformer, and it's about taking the experience was bad and the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like talk about that adoption. When I've made bad decisions, maybe it's a hiring decision, maybe it's something I did in business, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I do is try to figure out 5 positives from it.
Oh yeah.
What are
Good.
5 things? So, if I hired this employee that was a complete failure, I lost all kinds of money, was a culture pariah, all these things,
Mm-hmm.
I can still pick 5 positives out of it. One of the 5 positives, I learned how to hire better,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Transform that experience into positive. Make it wins
Mm-hmm.
and lessons. Because if you are not getting those bad things into the lessons,
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem. So your goal as a leader is not to say you did this wrong. Your goal as a leader is to make them think, what lessons did I learn? Let them tell you the lessons they learned.
Yeah.
You talked about me being intentional, and usually there's like 3 adjectives, whether people like me or not, right? That's usually pretty polarized. I'm 50-50. They always use certain adjectives, and one of them is intentional.
Yeah.
So I must be doing something in my life that's the thing people always say, you said that. But one of the things I always say is sometimes in leadership, you have to be intentional about being unintentional.
Yeah. That's so
And again, let
good,
me say
Greg.
it, be intentional
Yeah.
about being unintentional. Let things happen.
Happen.
Let the
Yeah.
natural flow. There's a reason why so many people don't launch, because they want perfection. We call it 80% rule around here, MVP, minimum viable product.
Yep.
Let it fail. Let
Right.
it break. There's a reason why if you want a self-managing company, you take 30-day sabbatical. It's not so you're 30 days out there so you can prove what breaks in the company can be fixed by the company. And I
Yes.
think that's what my dad did really well, is he let me make mistakes.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what great leaders do, is they not only let you make mistakes, but they let you teach the lessons to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
that is the key thing. So I think that we get that wrong with our children.
Yep.
I think we get that wrong with leaders. Let them
Yeah.
make mistakes and be their biggest cheerleader and be there for their down moments. Don't solve the answers for them.
So good, Greg. I mean, one of the things that I often will say to young leaders and new leaders is that, so often through our lifetime, we've been taught what to think, not how to think. And what you're talking about is creating the environment in which a leader can learn to think for themselves. And really what you're talking about too is a coaching approach. You're asking questions of the person that you're helping to learn and grow from, their mistakes or their failures. You're asking them to think and to find ways to look at things differently and to come up with the 5 things that are positives or things that you learned from the failure. And I think that is so needed in our world today, in both in business and in our personal lives as well, because too many people don't know how to think. They just repeat what other people say.
Along those lines, I always believe that our Creator has given us every tool inside of us that we need.
Yeah,
And
we're
that's just
fully
somebody that's
resourced.
obsessed with reading leadership books and writing. Every book I read, I write a book report on it. I
Yeah.
talk about it. I told you I try to invoke all 5 senses. So
Yes.
if you're out scratch and sniff leadership books, it'd be great. But if I'm going to spend 5 hours reading a book, I want to develop it. But it's not teaching me how to think, right? It's not doing that.
Right.
And so all those leadership development tools are good, but I believe we have it in ourselves if we learn how to think. So if you want to learn how to be a good leader, I believe every person has experienced at some point in their life
Mm-hmm.
a great leader. John
Yes.
Maxwell always says leadership is influence,
Yep.
nothing more and nothing less. Everyone has somebody they're influencing. You
Mm-hmm.
could be a 5-year-old that's influencing your grandparents' buying patterns, right?
Right.
Like every person has an influence.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't believe you have an influence, please seek help, right? Understand that
Right.
God designed you and
Yeah.
loves you, you're perfect as you are.
Yeah.
Once you start to understand in your brokenness that you're perfect,
Mm-hmm.
once you understand that you're an influencer, you
Yeah.
can start to recognize the people that are leaders around you. Who are the people in your life
Mm-hmm.
that have transformed you for the better?
Yeah.
And who are the people in your life that transfer you from the worse?
Mm-hmm.
And don't look at what they did, look at how they treated you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's where my best leadership principles, why I believe more is caught than taught, was because I wasn't just watching my dad, I was watching why I was effective. When I
Mm.
was sitting in quarterly sessions as employees,
Yeah.
and when he would give coaching, it worked versus when coaching didn't work,
Right.
I was paying attention to that. When he was in a business leader meeting and he was getting to influence his decisions, when he was going to Pennsylvania Optometry Association, say we need business courses in here, a bunch of eye doctors like that's a waste of money.
Yeah.
I saw how he did that. When he brought optometrists from around the country to come live with us for a week and not pay a dime so they could be better optometrists because he understood the
Mm.
profession got bigger. See, I learned those type of tools
Yeah.
into my fiber, my being. So I think what you need to do is you need to pause and reflect the mentors in your life. And it's kind of the
Mm.
golden rule and the platinum rule. There's something in between. I don't have a name
Yeah.
for it because
Yeah.
the golden rule is treat others the way I want to be treated.
Right.
Platinum is the way others, but there's
Mm-hmm.
something treat others the way I've seen be effective, right?
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
kind of
that's
there's
good.
some type of thing in there
That's
because when
good.
you start to see great coaching, it all looks the same. And so, by the way,
Mm.
if you start thinking through that mentor, please do an extra step and write that mentor a thank you note today about
Yes.
hey, you impacted my life.
Yeah.
Show them ROI on their investment in you. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised what they'll pour back in you and what will happen to you. But man, that's something I do every year. I look at the mentors in my life who's impacted my life and I write them a thank you note.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a part of my life. Thank you for walking into my life and doing that stuff. So, but I think that if you study the mentors in your life, you'll have every tool you need.
No doubt about it. And on that note, from a mentorship perspective, so a little self-serving here, I created a mentorship guide. So how to on the front end, how to prepare for a mentorship meeting, because so oftentimes people don't prepare for that mentorship meeting. They just go in and they think, teach me, oh great one. Well, that's not intentional. Have a desired outcome. What do you want to get from this particular mentor? And so then once they teach you and once you learn and you come back and you share what you've learned, yeah, and then I love the thing that you shared is just send them a note, thank them because they're pouring into your life. But I just think that preparation part is so important because if we're not intentional with how we're approaching those mentorship sessions, we're not going to get the most out of them.
I you're sitting on a topic I'm really passionate about. So I intentionally mentor 10 people a year. I write down in my annual report and I
Mm,
seek out like you're going to be officially mentored. And I get approached. I spend a lot of time speaking at colleges and
mm,
about my profession. People want to be mentored.
Yeah.
And I asked a simple question. What of my videos have you watched? So you
Hmm.
want my time, but you're not willing to invest in my time. So I
Right.
just had a guy last week. He's been trying to get it on my mentorship calendar for 6 months. He's another financial planner, career changer.
Mhm.
And we show up the meeting. He goes, he wanted help on, there's this financial planning software I teach called eMoney. He had watched my entire master class, which is 40 hours of content,
Wow. Yeah.
and then had specific questions that he wanted to. So now he's showing me
Love it.
ROI. And
Yeah.
so when he asked at the end, can I get another people on a counter? He said, what day do you want?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Leaders want to show ROI. So if you get that
Yep.
meeting with a mentor, what are you doing? And I would say it's not enough to just write a thank you note. You want to be oddly specific about what you took from that meeting
Mm.
and transformed and implemented in your life. Dave, thank you for coming and
Yeah.
teaching at Teach Passion Summit. The way that you hosted that meeting has changed the style that I'm doing as guide on the side versus sage on the stage. Oddly
Mm.
specific to something I learned from you, right?
That's
Dave,
amazing.
thank you for working and changing the lives of my team members.
Mhm.
Your inner circle has been extremely impactful. They both started talking about their personality assessments and behavior patterns
I love
that
it.
I've been trying to teach them for years that they didn't recognize. They're both getting serious about the core values because the prophet's never honored my hometown, right? These are all these specific things that you've done in my life
That's so
that I'm
cool.
saying, Dave, thank you for pouring into my life. I
Mm.
am better off
Mm.
for you being my life. One of my friend's dads always had to say, and I never met his dad, or I met his dad. I don't know his dad really well.
Mm.
And he always said, leave people off better than you found them.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you
So
let that
good.
mentor know that they've left you better off, they will
Yeah.
open up. So it's that's one of the ones is be prepared for it. But
Mm.
if you're not prepared, just ask questions
Yes.
and then make sure you show ROI in it. My other big thing I always say from if you want to have somebody mentor you, the two other things I think people do it really wrong
Yeah.
is be transparent.
Right.
Don't say I want to pick your brain.
Yeah.
Don't say it like, no, I admire what you've done for X, Y, Z reasons.
Yep.
And the reason why I would love to get an hour of your time is because I'm hoping to get this out of this and
Hmm.
potentially have you be a mentor in my life so I can grow and develop.
Yeah. Right.
When you
Right.
say to somebody, you have done this, be a guide for me, right? Show me,
Hmm.
Yoda, show me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, show
Right.
me, right?
Right.
Uh, all the different guides and all the stories, show me how to do this. People can't resist it. You
Right.
can't find a high level leader
Oh yeah.
because to get to that level, you have to have, even if you're a bad leader, you got some servanthood in you, right? You can't
Absolutely.
survive. It's
It's
painful.
baked into your DNA. Yeah.
And so they can't resist me. You're like, well,
Yeah.
you want to learn from me. So the other thing I always say is you got to show them and stand out from the crowd you're serious. And my big mentorship thing, and I actually learned this from my brother Jason, when you ask for a mentor, always ask them for a cup of coffee at 6 a.m. It doesn't matter if they drink coffee.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're an early person.
Yep.
There's some subliminal things that you did and ask to buy the cup of coffee.
Yes.
So one, you're saying their time's valuable. No leader's gonna let you buy them a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Two, you're saying your time's so valuable that I want to meet with you before the day.
Yep.
Three, I'm motivated enough to get up and I'm taking this serious,
Serious. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, people are like, what about something else, a cup of coffee? If you only drink a cup of coffee, just off, it's the fact you're buying it. You can
Right.
sit at a coffee shop, drink water, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, I don't care how back end in your life you are in terms of financially, you could probably afford to pay a $3 cup of coffee. This person's
Yep.
going to transform your life. By the way, if you
Exactly.
can only afford one cup of coffee, then you're going to pick better mentors.
That's
And
right.
real like like we could have a whole hour-long podcast about that simple concept of 6 a.m. in the
Yeah.
morning. I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee.
That's so
That will
good.
get more appointments. And what they'll say is, no, I actually don't drink coffee and I'm not an early person, which most leaders are. Not
Yeah.
because early gets you up. It's just once 8 a.m. hits, other people's priorities invade your priorities. So
Yeah.
if you want to get stuff done, you have to start before 8 a.m. or other
Right.
people's priorities invade your priorities. So it's not that like there a lot of times, if you ask me, that's my sacred space.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say no, but I'll grab a coffee at 11 a.m.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that type of thing. So
Yeah.
man, I just believe that so much that everyone needs a mentor.
I
We
agree.
all need a guide to lead us.
Yeah.
We all need somebody to learn from,
Hmm.
but we're too scared to approach people. And it's really easy. It is so easy to get somebody to mentor you.
It is, and I think that sometimes we get afraid of asking people for time and asking people to pour into us. And I don't know why we feel like we have to be afraid, because even at 61 years old, I'm learning to ask people for things that I maybe don't even necessarily expect. I mean, I've had people here on this podcast and I've asked them to come on and they said yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So
You
I
put them
think
on
that,
that pedestal. This goes
yeah,
back to earlier.
yes,
We have a celebrity status. They can do
yeah,
no wrong.
right,
No, they put their pants on, as my football coach used to say, the same exact way. They're the same level as you,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
We're all made in God's image. We're
right,
all the same. We all have 168 hours in a week, no matter what you do,
yep,
right? And so I think that a lot of times we're just so scared because we think we're so low. We think but the other part of it is we're
yeah,
not confident because we don't even know why I want to have the meeting. This goes to
right,
preparation.
yeah, yeah,
If I say to you, I want to learn how you built this great podcast, I'm thinking about starting one. I'm very intentional,
right,
and I'm telling you what the ROI is. I know what I'm showing up to the meeting for,
yep,
but it's like salespeople. Like, nobody tells you what their product is.
right.
Nobody tells you like all this stuff that people are like. Does anyone? I just got a voicemail from a Sandler trainer yesterday.
Oh yeah,
I know who he is. I know his voice. It was like, "Hey, Greg, this is so and so. I think it's really important we talk. It's Sailor Training 101." I was like, I want to call back and say, I'll never take Sailor sales training because it's bait and switch crap. I don't want to bait and switch. If you call me and say, Greg, I would like a half hour of your time to talk to you about my product to be transformational to increase the sales of your company,
yeah,
I'll return your call.
right,
But if you're going to hide it, I'm not going to return your call. And by the way, if you do, like, it's like headhunters that call in. I'm one of Greg's clients. I need to get money out. Well, I handle that for him. I only talk to Greg. They're going to find. So you just want to start this relationship based upon a lie. Don't you ever call this number back again. Click.
click, yeah, right,
You know what I mean? So I think that
yeah,
that's what we're so afraid to do it. But if we're just extremely intentional, and what's the worst case scenario? They say, you know what? I can't do it.
right, okay, yeah,
Okay. But I
okay,
think that's
yeah,
if it's really hard to turn somebody down. It's that intentional. Another quick thing about the mentorships.
yeah,
So I've had multiple people that I mentor, and I do the meeting with them. They're all excited to get a meeting. And I say to them, if you would like another meeting, you have to show me the ROI. Now,
yep,
I've always made sure I talked about thank you notes.
yeah,
And I would tell you, this is off the top of my head, but about 2 out of 10 meetings that I've done have actually gone the extra step to write me a thank you note.
really, only two,
And I literally told them
20%.
that in the meeting.
Oh my gosh,
And then they wonder why the next meeting I cancel it.
yeah, yeah, right,
By the way, I'm not going to just cancel. I'm going to say, I want you to know, I told you to write me a thank you card. You haven't told me one reason why you deserve a second meeting or one thing that I've done in your life, because I'd rather say I'm impact driven. And I
yeah,
believe every leader, I used to think I was success driven. I'm impact driven.
yeah,
I want to God gave me 168 hours. So if I'm going to be a good steward of my time,
yeah,
I need to get ROI for all of my time. Part of it's
love
how I
that,
want.
man, I love that,
So
yeah,
if I'll spend all the time on the road. If you keep coming back to be like, I'm getting better. I'm
yeah,
getting better. I'm the most successful financial planner in my entire state.
mm,
Then I'm going to keep pouring in your life.
right,
I believe great servant leaders. I get more joy out of other success
mm,
than I could ever get. And that's why I think we always say leadership is like coaching.
yeah,
I think it's fatherhood. And like I think
mm,
like there's a reason
so
why
good, yeah,
God is the father and the son,
yeah,
and why that relationship is so strong in the Bible between father and son.
mm-hmm,
Great leaders are fathers.
yeah,
And you start thinking about, what does a great father do? A great
mm-hmm,
father has agape love. It's unconditional.
right,
We talk about our team all the time. It's a teaching that comes from Pastor Matt Keller. We want every team member to be fully known, fully loved,
mm-hmm,
and fully challenged. We
mm,
could spend 10 hours on that topic. It's like a
sure,
tripod stool. Because
yeah,
if one of those is missing, and we all have been to that. So you've had somebody in your life that fully challenged you,
mm-hmm,
fully knew you, but
yeah,
didn't fully love you. That's the coach that was kind of the ball buster coach,
yeah,
right? He was challenging you. He knew you. He knew what your speed was. He knew what you were good at, but he didn't love you.
love you, yeah,
And he didn't
mm,
get the full potential out of you. You can be
yeah,
fully loved, like somebody that loves you.
yeah,
And technically as humans, we can never have agape love. We just try to get to agape love, right?
yeah,
But it's that the closest form, right? Above philia, some type of agape love,
mm,
fully loved, fully known. Like, I love you, I know you, but I
mm-hmm,
never challenge you.
yeah,
And right? That's the teacher that you loved, but you don't remember. Like, when you think you're great teachers and
yeah,
great coaches, they have to have all three of these components. And again,
yep,
we can break these down
oh
and
yeah,
but that's ultimately what you need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a father is going to fully know their child, fully love their child, and
Mm-hmm.
fully challenge their child. I believe in America right now today, we're fully knowing our children almost too much, right?
Yeah.
We got trackers on them.
Yeah.
We're following their
Right.
Instagram.
Yeah.
The old thing was we had a swimming pool, so my friends would come over, my parents would know, but they'd still like give them alone time. Let them screw up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let them try a little drugs if that's what it is. Because the
Yeah.
only way they're gonna know a hot stove is hot if they touch it.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
can't imagine like not knowing stove's hot if I don't touch it. Now I
Right.
just gotta rely on like that's like lessons. Like you can't teach people lessons. A lot of times they have to experience themselves. I can tell you a
Themselves.
million reasons why you should make this mistake I made, but I sometimes have to experience them on my own. So we're not letting the
Yeah.
children. We fully know them. We
Yeah.
fully love them. We put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
We're not challenging them at all. Let's put them in a bubble, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing the same thing in businesses.
Yeah.
We're too afraid to challenge people, hold them accountable. We talk about we've had pretty high turnover in our team the last two years.
Mm.
We started questions: do we have high turnover? And we started realizing we don't
Mm.
because we've never lost a team member that we were trying to keep. They were
Yeah.
either coached up and coached out,
Yep.
or they were fired.
Sure.
Every single one that's left here. They were right people a lot of times, great people. Some of
Mm-hmm.
these people that like I genuinely love them,
Mm-hmm.
but not the right fit for their job, right fit for the role.
Yeah.
So what we learned is we hire slow and fire fast, not as a cliche,
Mm-hmm.
as an actual ethos of our
Process.
company.
Yeah.
And so what I learned, so I started all these other business owners, and this is off the top of my head about what I've seen observational.
Mm-hmm.
63% of all statistics are made up on the spot, right?
Right. Right.
But about 90% of small business owners I've talked to have at least 1 to 2 team members that they don't want to have on their team, but they're too scared to fire them. They're too scared to fully challenge them. They're
Challenging.
too scared, too much time to coach them up or coach them out.
Mm.
But then they're destroying their team's productivity. They're destroying their culture,
Yeah.
and that's fully challenged. I believe wholeheartedly that firing is an act of love.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
My team always says like you're really good at firing. I'm like no, I hate it.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than coming in and telling somebody they're fired.
Mm-hmm.
The repercussions of that, their paycheck's going to stop. Now we give
Mm-hmm.
pretty decent severance packages, stuff,
Right.
but the moral story is their whole world's changed. You know how that person reacts. It is one of the worst jobs of being a leader, but it's one of the
Yeah.
most important jobs because it's worse than the alternative
Yeah.
of the relationship growing to where you can't talk to them.
Right.
My one mentor was trying to get him to come over to his company. And long story short, I had to last minute say I wasn't coming over, and he agreed with the reason why I wasn't coming over. But he said this thing. He goes, Greg, if you see me in a bar in the next 2 weeks, don't come up to me because I wouldn't buy you a beer. But if you see me in 2 months, come up and I'll buy you a beer. And he's one of the mentors I write a thank you note to every year. You don't want your relationship to sour like that. Like all you're doing when you both know this isn't working,
Mm-hmm.
is you're being rude to the person. Clear is kind. I
Mm-hmm.
tell my team all the time, I got a booger in my nose, tell me.
Tell me. Yeah.
So, like, if a person's not working, the worst thing you can possibly do, because you're not giving them the opportunity
Mm.
to get better.
Yeah.
You're not
Right.
giving them the opportunity to be somewhere they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Every person was uniquely designed by God perfectly. They have a place that they would be perfectly happy, and it's not this company. So you're robbing them of that opportunity. You know what's wild is?
That's
I keep in touch with most of the employees that left here.
cool.
One, I was just, and I pray over them still.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Now
so
I just
cool.
text this one person, like, I just want you to know I'm praying over you. They haven't been here for a year. Randomly, like 3 days later, one of our team members ran into them. They talked about they've never been happy in their life. They left this profession. They're like, it's much happier. And one person told me, I've had multiple people thank me with thank you letters after I fired them. The one
Mm.
person came up and hugged me and started crying. He goes, I needed this release. I
Ah.
was too scared to leave on my own.
Yes. Mm.
And
Mm.
so what you think you're doing by not firing him is one of the most selfish acts you can do because it's really all about you. You leader are too scared
Yeah.
to upset them. You're
Yeah.
too scared to do what you're called to do, which is fully challenging them. And because you're selfish, that person's not going to fully develop the person they've been called to be. That's why I believe
good.
fire is an act of love.
That's so good, Greg. Man, I'm telling you what. If any leader who's listening right now doesn't get that, they need to go back and re-listen to what you just said the last couple of moments, because I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of people who don't see they don't recognize that it is being selfish, because sometimes people are just not a good fit, and you want to be able to help them to be the best that they can be. And if you're going to help them to be the best that they can be, you've got to help them to go to where they can do that. It may not just be with you.
That doesn't mean that they're bad. Yeah, one of my good
Exactly.
friends is a financial planner. They were
Yeah.
going over their company core values. And the first one, I forget the exact way they said it, but it's like urgency. They're like, we will always be responsive to our clients when they need it. I'm like, do not call me after 5 o'clock on a Friday. That is my sacred family time. And
Right.
if you're a client that can't respect that, go be served somewhere else. I
Yes.
tell my clients, I would never answer the phone right now while I'm in a podcast with you.
Right. Right.
That's disrespectful to you. That's disrespectful to person listening. When I'm in front of a client, that's the most important person in the entire world to me. I don't have my
Yeah.
phone on the where anyone get a hold of me.
Yeah.
So like I would get fired from that company because they're the opposite. They're like,
Yeah.
when you're on vacation, we exist for our clients. Yeah, I exist for my clients. I serve my clients, but that's not how I serve my clients. Is, by the way, I also think it's bad for the clients in urgency, and I can go on down a whole thing because a
Right.
lot of times you're actually not helping them solve the problems, just like with when you solve the problems for your own employees. But that's a great example of
Yeah.
somebody who I'm great friends with, that I fully agape love, that I could never work with them in their company.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
There are some great financial planners that do financial planning just as well, if not better than us.
Yes.
It would not be
Yeah.
part of our culture fit,
Yeah, exactly. Well,
but
and
you're too
speak.
scared, too selfish.
Yeah, and speaking of culture fit, it's interesting you say that because one of the fundamentals that I often hear in high performing companies is like the equivalent of what you just shared. Be a fanatic about response time. And I think that there's a place for that, being a fanatic about response time, but there's also a place for not like you just said, like, look, right now you are everything, all my focus is going right here and right now, and I'm where my feet are, something that you and I learned from Clint Hurdle, like be where your feet are. And I think that too oftentimes we disrespect both the people that we're in front of, and even like you're talking about, um, your family is, you lead your family too. And I can't help my clients if I'm not being the father that I need to be, or the husband that I need to be. So I think there's a whole lot of truth to that.
Show me your calendar and show me your wallet, and I'll show you your priorities. And I'm
Right
so
on.
sick of business leaders telling me that they have one side prioritize their wife, which you should prioritize above your children. And if you're a female, prioritize your husband above that, then your children, and then your business.
Yeah.
And then I sit there and watch them do the exact opposite and answer a phone call when on vacation. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying there's not emergencies. And I'm
Right.
not saying there's a time and place to pour into each person. Life balance is a made up thing. You can never be balanced, right?
Yeah.
At a
Yeah.
certain point in time, you have seasons in life, you have seasons even in a day and seasons
Yeah.
in a week.
Yep.
But are you being intentional with those seasons? And
Mm-hmm.
so that boundaries is so important to understand. And by the
Yeah.
way, you did the reason why it's not acceptable by your clients should be clear. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
potential client, you meet me the first meet, at the end of it, I say, here's my phone number. Chances are when you call, probably never answer. I'm always in front of good clients like yourself. And I show them the same respect I showed you, that I am completely, fully present.
Present. Yeah.
When you leave me a voicemail, let me know a good date and time to call you back so
Right.
that I can schedule that time to be fully present with you.
Present. Yeah. So good.
And if it's an
Mm.
emergency, call my team and they'll help you. But if
Mm-hmm.
we're doing our work together, you should really not have emergencies. I'm a
Right.
financial planner. We are planning ahead.
Right.
Like, there's
Right.
not emergencies, there's not crises.
Yeah.
I
So
would say,
good.
like, do you think corporate companies have an emergency board meeting based upon the election results? No.
No.
Why are you doing it? Right? Like, it's
Right. Right.
wild. Like, but I think
Uh,
the thing I
that's
always
so
put in
good.
perspective, and so my wife, she
Yeah.
always would yell at me and say, Clint, be where your feet are at, right? And I came from Clint Hurdle and a leadership talk like 10 years ago. It's
Yeah.
that impactful that, like, it's a part of our mantra.
Yeah.
But the other thing my wife will say to me is, hey, Martha, pay attention. And so I always ask leaders,
Yeah.
are you being Martha
Yeah. It's good.
or are you being Mary?
Mm.
And which one did Jesus love more?
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, we can get so focused, and I'm a doer, right? I get a,
Mm-hmm.
I, I get a
Yeah.
lot of that in me, right? So
Yep.
when are you going to pause and be present? Because that's what life is all about. It's
Mm.
about connections
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
doing life together. By the
Yeah.
way, if you've never defined your three roles, I have a blog about my website. It comes from a mentor of mine, Eric Guys, defining. We all have three life roles. and we're really big in our company. We do financial plans. We do three financial priorities, and
Uh-huh.
you can't go after priority three until you get priority one. And
Right.
it's like the hardest thing to get clients to do because nobody wants to be clear. Everyone wants to be wishy-washy.
Yep.
My first role is leader first,
Mm.
husband second,
Mm.
father third.
Mm.
And the reason why is I can't be fully present as a husband if I'm not being fulfilled as a leader. And
Yeah.
I could sit there and try to say that's not my wire to my DNA and lie to myself and
Mm-hmm.
tell everyone, which destroys my trust, that I'm the number one thing in life is being a father. The number one thing is being a husband. Well, if I say that, then why am I taking business trips? If I
Mm.
say that, why do I work late business?
Yeah. Mm.
And so it's not that I'm not present for my wife and don't love my wife.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't go on dates together. It's not that we don't spend time together. It's not that we don't do Bible study together or pray together. It's none of that. It's that I prioritize being a leader first.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I do that, I'm extremely happy and fulfilled. And then when I'm on a date with my wife, I'm actually dating her
Yeah.
as opposed to thinking mentally what's going on in the office.
Office. Yeah. So good. That's so good, Greg.
Figure out how you're wired,
Yeah. Man.
but be honest with yourself. Being intentional
Mm.
is not about a wish list, it's about a goal list.
Mm-hmm.
See, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, they're like, I want to be intentional in my life, and they create all these aspirations that they never achieve, so they're never going to achieve. So they're not being intentional, they're
Yeah.
being wishful.
Right. Right.
The reason why I'm intentional is I say this is the direction I'm going,
Yep.
and I go that direction. Oh, and by the way, if I get a little bit down a path and realize I want to change my direction, change your
Change
direction,
of direction. Yeah. Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like change
Yeah.
this. If I no longer, I had this podcast. Somebody asked me the question. It blew my mind. I thought I'd seen just about every question, and he said, "What would be your graduation speech?"
Hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
I've been asked that. And as I thought about it, I said, if I go back, because it's usually like you go back, tell your 25-year-old self, 21-year-old
Yeah.
self.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
never gotten like it was high school graduation, but like 18-year-old graduation. I know what it is. Your priorities will change. See, at
Mm.
that time, all I
Yeah. So good.
prioritized was becoming a state senator. Now I hate politics.
Yeah.
All the time I prioritized was running campaigns. Now I hate politics, right?
Yeah.
My whole life was involved in politics and getting ahead in
Mm.
politics. At that
Yeah.
time, I was youngest elected official in Pennsylvania. It was just the things that mattered to me most. And now
Mm-hmm.
I literally can't stand politics. But I'm very grateful for that experience because I've learned so much from it, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
over time, your priorities will change, and that's completely fine.
Mm.
So if you set a goal and you realize that once you're getting there, you no longer care about that goal,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe it's time to reset it.
Mm.
Qualifying
Yeah.
for Boston, once I got into it, was driving my wife nuts because how much time I was running and ran foot injuries. So no longer is not a priority. Now it's just, all right, let's get four done this year. Four different
Jeez.
marathons as opposed to qualifying for Boston, right?
Yeah.
Shift your goal, shift your mindset
Yeah.
to intentionally become the person you want to be instead of drifting through life.
Yeah, man, I love that. And I think that's a great place to kind of start to bring this in for a landing, and because it talks about impact, and I know that you are, you talked about, going not being focused on success, but being focused on impact. So I guess I'm curious, what's the impact that you want to have on leaders and people in your life, and maybe even asking it a little bit differently. Like, what do you want people to say about you, at the end of your life, kind of like this legacy statement?
Yeah. So I would love my legacy statement to be Greg served God by serving others.
Mm.
My life was transformed and impacted by Greg. His fingerprint is on my life story.
Mm.
That's as simple as what it is. That transformation can be different fundamentally for every single person, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to leave every person I meet, whether it was somebody that we didn't get along, right? Somebody I fired, somebody that we agree politically different, or whatever else it might be, that they are better off,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through things they don't want to do in their life, right? Like
Yeah.
negative lessons, but they can literally say, if they're being honest, that their life is better for that conversation we had
Mm.
or me being present in their life, and they are grateful that we met along the path.
Mm.
From a company standpoint of view, we say all the time, we want to have an impact so great that our community would weep
Mm.
if we closed our doors. In other words,
Uh,
that impact comes in many different forms, but we
yeah.
want it to be so great that the community's better off with Beratung Advisors being here. than it is without it. Because if this is God's company, he's appointed me to steward, I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant from him. And I do that by multiplying my talents and having an impact. So yeah, my obituary, which I've written, and I encourage everyone to rewrite their obituary every single year. That's what it's all about. And it's changed over time. Because my grandfather's, I remember this very distinctly, his funeral, this pastor got up and he said, Cecil Fuhr, he served. And he kept saying, when the country went to war, he served. When he did this, he served. When he did this, he served. Everything ended up, he served. And that was my mindset, was I wanted to hear he served. And now I don't care about he served. It's he had an impact on my life. That's what impact's all about. Because when we get better, the whole world gets better. It starts to create this multiplication effect. And we can become the body of Christ here on earth if we all just have a little bit of impact on each other.
Man. So if you're listening right now, you understand why I wanted to have Greg come on the podcast and just share his perspective, his leadership, his views. My goodness, this has just been like a master class in about 45 minutes. And I'm so appreciative, Greg, because you have had an impact. You've had an impact on my life. Whether you know it or not, I've learned so much from you, and I wished I would have learned the things that you've learned in your life at your age, and it's taken me 61 years to get to certain things that I'm still learning. So I'm grateful for you, man. I'm really grateful for you. I've learned so much, and we've only just begun. So I'm really, really appreciative of you coming and sharing your wisdom and just being here on the podcast.
I love it. And if you're a leader that wants to help with being transformed, I encourage you to check out our Teach Passion Summit we're doing next year.
Yes.
Because we're going to help equip you. So this is one of the big things I've talked about. There's all these different conferences out there, but we're developing a conference that's 2 days of transformational change. We have a guided journey we're taking you on together. And really what we're focused on, and we talk about impact so great our community weep if we close our doors. We are focused on entrepreneurs and their teams. Leaders, I've heard what you're going through. You want something to develop your team. That's why I've hired Inner Circle for my team. But you want that catalyst, that change to come in and help them and grow together. So what we've designed as a conference is affordable enough for small business leaders to bring their entire team so they can work on transformational change together. Because imagine your company where every single person in that company is in their unique ability, doing what God's called them to do, and living that fulfilling life. And we believe we can help you for that. So if you're interested, check it out, teachpassionsummit.com. Dave, you're going to be speaking there, closing it up. I'm so excited to have you close. We always need a strong closer and a bullpen. So I'm pumped about it because I think it's going to work, because ultimately our impact is we want to make Pittsburgh more famous for God than it is for steel. And we think this is one of the ways we can help do that.
I love that, Greg. Man, I am so excited. We will make sure that link goes in the show notes, and I really do encourage people to register for the Teach Passion Summit. I'm so excited to be there and be a part of it. And so if you're listening and we've not met in person, I'll be there, as Greg just shared. And so I'd love to meet you. I would love to meet you there. Greg, thank you, my friend. Can't wait till we can actually see each other in person again really soon.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Be well.